Hello everyone, in this time-lapse tutorial here I'm going to show you how I did this Springer Spaniel drawing in Pastels. Now there are a few different elements for this portrait and I tackled different parts of Dodd's body with different approaches. So with the face here you can see that I have just used the pencils themselves, right from the very base layers all the way to the final details. When I get onto the body, I then use my sanded soft pastel sticks for my base layer there and then add my detailed layers with my pastel pencils. My tutorials on Patreon do focus on a few of these different techniques in case members don't have soft pastel sticks. Maybe some members have pan pastels, and I also have tutorials showing you how I use those as well for the portraits. And then, as I say, just the tutorials where I've used the pencils from start to finish. For this portrait, I had to add a couple of additional elements. So Dodd loved a tennis ball, like most Springer Spaniels do, but she would only give up the ball that she had for another tennis ball. So her owners asked me if I could incorporate a second tennis ball which wasn't in the reference photo, and that sort of added a little bit more of the her personality to it and made that portrait more unique rather than just copying the reference photo exactly. I also added a little stick between her front legs because she also again liked to carry one of those around as well. So that's the really nice thing when working with pet portraits and that side of things, is you can actually make the portrait more personal and you can use your artistic license to use that reference photo as a guidance and then incorporate other elements should you want to. Now for that, and whenever I am required to do that, I always design my layouts in a photo editing software so that I know exactly where the tennis ball would look best in terms of the position, how the composition would work and so on. It's best to do all of that design process on the computer first before putting the pencils to your paper, so that you're not having to potentially waste supplies from finding out that the tennis ball would have looked better in a slightly different position and so on. And she already had the tennis ball in her mouth, so I didn't have to change anything to do with her face at all. I started off working on the face and then the left ear, and then I continued, as you can see here, working on the right hand side. Now with spaniel ears, it's all about the contrast and how you layer. I do have an in-depth real-time tutorial available on my Patreon channel showing you just how I do a spaniel ear from start to finish. So if that's of interest, I'll link my Patreon in the description below. So when it comes to drawing tennis balls, there are a few things that I like to do from the beginning. So I'm working in the opposite way and I'm working from light to dark. The reason being is I want that yellow colour to show throughout the entire portrait. If I was to have added my darker shadows first, I may not have been able to have got that yellow quite as bright as I'd wanted. So in that instance, my personal preference is to work from light to dark. Now depending on the lighting and how saturated your photograph is, the tennis ball is going to be a slightly different shade of yellow. So really do study that and then use more of your vibrant pencils for your base layers if you need to. So one of the more trickier parts of the portrait of any Springer Spaniel portrait really is the long white chest fur. Now for this I have quite a specific way that I like to layer. So I'll put my base layer down like what I'm doing here. As I've mentioned, I'm using my sanded soft pastel sticks with my eye makeup applicators, getting a nice good base layer down first, not one solid colour. I am still closely studying that reference photo and mapping in my lights and my darks. I then go back over the top with my pastel pencils. I am saving my brightest white pencils like my Caran and my Derwent for my last layers. However, the biggest tip is to make sure that your base layers aren't too dark. The reason being is you'll end up more with a darker grey, a mid-tone grey looking white fur rather than how white the fur should be. Now most of the time white fur is not actually white either, so you don't want to go down with a pure white base layer because that will end up giving a bit more of a fake feeling to the fur. You'll see that the base layers that I've done throughout do start off with a light to mid-tone grey, but it isn't too dark. The darkest parts of the white fur are where she's got those little black spots, the little markings she's got there. The rest of it is more of the greyer shades. And just like all the tutorials you see here on YouTube, I break everything down into small sections. So I will work on the lower part of the neck and the chest, then I'll take one leg at a time, and now I'm working on the other leg. For me, by breaking it down in this way, the portraits become far less daunting and I'm actually far more effective in how I work, and therefore the portraits come together a bit quicker. Now, the speed at which you draw is no reflection on the artist at all, but I do find that if I draw in entire set layers, so I did all of my base layer and then my second layer and so on, I find that I actually am slower because I'm spending more time looking at my reference photo because I'm stuck at that ugly stage where the base layers are being put in, like what we're working on now. It doesn't look great. So I like to work in small sections, get those areas 80-90% complete. Once the whole dog is at that level, I can then go back and rework the last 10%, add in more of my final details. Now, Dodd here is a prime example with how much variation is required in adjusting your pencil strokes and the length of those pencil strokes. I talk about it a lot in all of my tutorials because I think it's something that can often go a bit unnoticed. You don't want all of your pencil's details to be the same length. You'll end up making the fur on the entire body all of sort of very uniformed, and that's not what we want. We want this to be as realistic to that reference photo as possible. So for instance, I really want to make sure that my pencil strokes on her face are considerably shorter and also on her paws. If you look at how short the pencil strokes there are compared to the longer chest fur, there is a significant difference. So for the grass section of this portrait, I'm actually going to make a real-time version of this, which I'll upload to my Patreon channel in January. So if you would like to watch this, then as I say, I'll link my Patreon in the description below. But my biggest tip for grass is the variation. Make sure you get different shades of green. If the grass that you are drawing is green, make sure that you've got various shades in there, at least 3, and that the grass details that you are working on are going in different directions. You don't want them all really vertical and so on, because that will start to again make the grass look fake. And here is a photograph of her finished portrait. I really hope this quick video here was of use. I'll be uploading another video next week and I'm not quite sure what that will be. It will be in acrylics, I'd imagine, but I really do hope that everyone had a lovely Christmas and New Year. Thank you all so much for your support here on YouTube, all of the likes and your comments, it's really appreciated. And if the video was useful, I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up because it really does help. And if you like the videos that I'm uploading, hit the subscribe and the bell button, and then hopefully you'll get notified of future content.